The Wayfarer's hyperdrive disengaged with a shudder, and reality snapped back into focus. Through the cockpit viewport, Dromund Kaas materialized, a world wrapped in perpetual storm clouds, its surface barely visible beneath layers of atmospheric violence. Lightning arced between the clouds in patterns too regular to be natural, and even from orbit, the planet radiated a presence that made both warriors tense. "The dark side," Thor observed, his hand tightening on Mjolnir. "It saturates this entire world. I can feel it even though the force does not touch me, like standing near a furnace and feeling the heat without touching the flame." Kratos studied the planetary defenses through the ship's sensors. Orbital defense platforms ringed the world in 3 distinct layers, each bristling with enough weaponry to annihilate entire fleets. Sith capital ships patrolled in careful formations, their flight patterns suggesting military precision rather than random patrols. And descending through the storm clouds were massive structures, space elevators perhaps, or orbital tethers connecting the surface installations to the defensive grid. "They know we're coming," Kratos said flatly. "This is not a world caught unprepared. This is a fortress that has had time to set its defenses." As if in response to his words, the ship's communications system crackled to life. No request for identification, no challenge or warning, just a voice, ancient beyond measure, layered with harmonics that suggested it was speaking simultaneously across multiple dimensions of reality. "Thor Odinson, Kratos of Sparta, you have traveled far from your dying realms to stand before the eternal throne." The voice carried absolute authority, the kind that came not from volume, but from the certainty of power beyond question. "I am the Sith Emperor, and I have been waiting for you." Thor and Kratos exchanged glances. The fact that the Emperor knew their names, knew their origins, confirmed what they had suspected. This was no chance encounter. The rift, their arrival, perhaps even the specific location on Korriban, none of it had been an accident. "You claim to have been waiting," Thor called out, his voice carrying the resonance of Asgardian nobility. "Then you know why we have come. We seek knowledge of dimensional rifts, of the way home to our realms. Provide this knowledge, and we will depart your galaxy in peace." The Emperor's laugh was like stone grinding against stone. "Ha ha ha! Peace, how quaint! Tell me, God of Thunder, how many worlds have you defended through violence? How many enemies have you struck down with that hammer you carry?" A pause, heavy with implication. "And you, ghost of Sparta, how many gods did you murder to earn your titles? How many innocents died in the wake of your vengeance?" Kratos' expression hardened, but he said nothing. The Emperor's words were designed to provoke, to draw out anger. It was a tactic he recognized. He had used it himself when hunting prey that needed to be drawn into the open. "You know our histories," Kratos replied, his voice dangerously calm. "Then you know that we do not respond well to games. Speak plainly, Emperor. What do you want?" "I want what all beings of true power want, to transcend the limitations of this reality. For 1,000 years I have studied the boundaries between dimensions, seeking to break free of this galaxy's constraints." The viewport suddenly filled with a holographic projection, the Emperor's face, or what remained of it. Pale skin stretched over an ancient skull, eyes burning with yellow corruption so intense they seemed to bleed light. "You are proof that such barriers can be breached. You are proof that beings from beyond the Force can exist in this reality, and you will provide me with the knowledge I seek." "We don't serve tyrants," Thor said simply. "We kill them." Brave words. Let us see if you can make them reality. The transmission cut, and simultaneously every defensive platform within range opened fire. The Wayfarer's alarm system screamed as turbo laser fire converged on their position from a dozen angles. Kratos' hands flew across the controls. For all his reputation as a simple warrior, he had piloted Asgardian skiffs and Norse longships capable of traversing the world tree. The principles of navigation transcended specific technologies. The freighter rolled, dove, and accelerated in ways its designers never intended, dodging streams of energy that could vaporize a city block. But there were too many guns, too many angles of attack. A glancing hit struck the Wayfarer's starboard engine, and the ship shuddered violently. Warning lights painted the cockpit red, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. "We won't reach the surface intact," Kratos reported, fighting the controls as the ship began a barely controlled descent into the storm lair. "The engine is failing." Thor stood, Mjolnir crackling with building energy. "Then we don't land the ship, we abandon it."
The fall will kill anyone without our durability, which is why we're the only ones aboard. Thor moved to the cargo bay door controls. "Get us as close to the surface as you can. I'll handle our descent." Kratos guided the dying ship through the storm clouds, and the full horror of Dromund Kaas revealed itself. The capital city, Kaas City, sprawled across the landscape like a monument to authoritarian architecture. Massive pyramids constructed of black stone dominated the skyline, each one crowned with lightning rods that channeled the perpetual storm's energy into dark purposes. Between them, fortresses and temples formed a cityscape that seemed designed more to intimidate than to house populations efficiently. And moving through those streets were armies, not the scattered patrols of a city at peace, but full military formations, Sith warriors in ceremonial armor, legions of regular soldiers, and war machines that defied easy description. All of it moving with purpose, flowing toward defensive positions, as if the entire city had been placed on high alert. "He's turned the entire planet into a killing ground," Thor observed. "Every soldier, every weapon, all focused on two targets." "Good," Kratos said, and there was grim satisfaction in his voice. "Then we know where to find them all." The Wayfarer screamed through the lower atmosphere, trailing smoke and flame. 2 kilometers above the city, Kratos set the autopilot to crash into one of the larger defensive installations, no point wasting the ship's kinetic energy, and then both warriors moved to the cargo bay. Thor opened the bay door manually, tearing the reinforced hatch from its hinges when the damaged electronics refused to cooperate. Wind howled through the opening, carrying with it the smell of ozone and something else: corruption, decay, the scent of a world saturated with dark power for so long it had seeped into the very soil. "Ready?" Thor asked, though it was more statement than question. Kratos secured the Leviathan axe and checked the blades of chaos one final time. "Always." They jumped. The fall was controlled chaos. Thor spun Mjolnir, using it to slow his descent and navigate toward a suitable landing zone, a large plaza surrounded by Sith military installations. Kratos threw the Leviathan axe ahead of him and used its pull to adjust his trajectory, angling toward the same location. Around them, the storm raged with unnatural fury, lightning striking the city's spires in a rhythmic pattern that suggested purpose rather than random discharge. They landed in the center of the plaza with impacts that cratered the stone and sent shockwaves radiating outward. Sith soldiers who had been converging on the location were thrown back by the landing's force, and the nearest building suffered cracked foundations and shattered windows. Thor and Kratos rose from their impact craters to find themselves surrounded, not by dozens of soldiers or even hundreds, by thousands. The plaza was ringed by Sith forces in every direction: infantry formations, armored vehicles mounting heavy weapons, Sith warriors with activated lightsabers, and above them, on every rooftop and balcony, snipers and artillery teams. And moving through those streets were armies, not the scattered patrols of a city at peace, but full military formations, Sith warriors in ceremonial armor, legions of regular soldiers, and war machines that defied easy description. all of it moving with purpose, flowing toward defensive positions as if the entire city had been placed on high alert. The lead figure stepped forward, and even from a distance, both warriors could sense something wrong about them. Not force corruption exactly, but something more fundamental, as if this being existed partially outside normal reality, occupying a space adjacent to the material world. "I am Scourge," the figure announced, his voice carrying across the plaza without technological amplification. "Emperor's Wrath, first blade of the eternal throne. You have been judged threats to the Empire's eternal dominion." He drew lightsabers. No, multiple lightsabers, 4 of them extending from weapons mounted on his gauntlets. "Your deaths will serve the Emperor's ascension." Thor planted Mjolnir against the cracked plaza stones. "I grow tired of beings who proclaim our deaths before attempting to achieve them. Its poor form makes you look foolish when you fail." "We have not failed in 400 years, Scourge replied. "We are the Emperor's answer to beings like you, those who exist outside the Force's touch. We have been trained, augmented, transformed specifically to kill gods." Kratos' laugh was harsh and without humor. "Many have made that claim. Hercules said he was the greatest warrior in Greece. Balder claimed he was invincible. Zeus himself sat on Olympus's throne and declared no force could overthrow him." He drew the blades of chaos, and their flames seemed to burn brighter in this dark place. "Then come, God-slayers, show me the strength that toppled pantheons, and I will show you that even gods can bleed." Scourge opened his gauntlets, the 4 lightsabers forming an X pattern before him. "Then come, God-slayers, show me the strength that toppled pantheons, and I will show you that even gods can bleed." The Sith forces opened fire. The plaza erupted into chaos. Blaster fire from thousands of weapons converged on Thor and Kratos from every angle, a storm of crimson energy that would have vaporized any conventional target. Artillery shells screamed down from the surrounding buildings, and the armored vehicles' main guns added their firepower to the devastating barrage. Thor raised Mjolnir and summoned lightning. Not precise, controlled strikes as he'd used aboard the Dominator, but raw elemental fury drawn from Dromund Kaas's perpetual storm. The lightning answered his call eagerly, too eagerly, as if the storm itself wanted to be unleashed. Bolts thick as tree trunks cascaded down from the sky, forming a crackling barrier around both warriors that vaporized incoming fire and ground it out against the plaza's stone. But this wasn't Asgardian lightning. Thor could feel the difference immediately. The storm was saturated with dark side energy, and drawing on it was like drinking poisoned wine. Powerful, intoxicating, but carrying corruption with every use. The lightning wanted to do more than defend. It wanted to kill indiscriminately, to strike down everything in range, friend and foe alike. "The planet itself is a weapon," Thor growled, maintaining the barrier through sheer will. "The storm carries their corruption." Kratos had already noticed. The blades of chaos, normally responsive and eager for battle, felt heavier here. The dark side energy that permeated everything was trying to feed the blades' curse, to enhance their destructive power while simultaneously binding them more tightly to Kratos' rage and guilt. It was insidious, offering strength while demanding payment in corruption. "Then we fight without drawing on this world's power," Kratos said. He charged. The ghost of Sparta crossed the plaza like an avalanche given human form. The Leviathan axe swept in horizontal arcs that carved through infantry formations, its frost forming ice sculptures of dying soldiers. Where the axe passed, the blades of chaos followed, not enhanced by the dark side, but burning with their own eternal fires. Kratos moved through the Sith forces like a scythe through wheat.
each motion economical and devastating. A Sith warrior attempted to use force speed to flank him. Kratos anticipated the move. He'd fought enemies who could manipulate time itself, and the Leviathan axe was waiting when the Sith appeared. The frozen weapon took the warrior in the chest, and he fell without a sound. An armored vehicle swiveled its main gun toward Kratos' back. Before it could fire, Thor's hammer struck it like a meteor. The vehicle crumpled, its armor meaningless against Asgardian strength and Uru metal. Mjolnir returned to Thor, and he used the momentum to launch himself forward, slamming into a Sith formation with enough force to scatter them like leaves. But for every soldier that fell, 2 more took their place. The Sith Empire had spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of overwhelming opposition through sheer numbers and coordinated tactics. Artillery continued to rain down, adjusted in real time by spotters who were coordinating the assault. Snipers targeted joints and perceived weak points, searching for vulnerabilities. And above it all, Scourge and his Emperor's Wrath descended from their platform. There were 5 of them total, Scourge himself and 4 others, each bearing armor and weapons that suggested different specializations. One carried a massive vibro blade crackling with energy. Another had gauntlets that hummed with a sound similar to Thor's lightning, but somehow inverted, as if they consumed electricity rather than generating it. The third moved with a grace that suggested preternatural speed, and the fourth was massive, easily 8 feet tall, and built like a fortress given flesh. "You fight well," Scourge acknowledged as his team spread out to flank. "Better than the reports suggested. The Jedi were correct to fear you." He began circling, his 4 lightsabers held in a defensive pattern. "But you face now what the Jedi could never create, warriors built specifically to counter your advantages." The massive warrior charged Kratos with surprising speed, but where Kratos expected physical impact, the warrior suddenly phased, his body becoming translucent, ghost-like. The Leviathan axe passed through him harmlessly, and then he re-solidified, his massive fist catching Kratos in the ribs with enough force to actually stagger the ghost of Sparta. Kratos felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine pain. The blow had connected, had hurt him through his godly durability. This warrior had been augmented with something that allowed him to bypass conventional defenses. "Interesting," Kratos said, blood on his lips. "You've found ways to hurt gods." "We've found ways to kill them," the massive warrior rumbled. The one with the speed enhancement attacked Thor, moving so fast they appeared as a blur. Thor, accustomed to fighting beings like Quicksilver and Hermes, tracked the movement through experience and instinct rather than sight. When the warrior appeared to deliver a strike, Mjolnir was waiting. The impact sent the speedster tumbling across the plaza, but they rolled to their feet unharmed. Their armor had somehow distributed the impact. The one with the energy-consuming gauntlets raised both hands toward Thor. The air between them shimmered, and suddenly Thor felt Mjolnir grow heavy. Not physically, but as if the enchantments were being drained, the divine energy that powered the hammer being siphoned away. "They've prepared counters for everything," Thor realized. "The Empire has studied how to fight beings like us." "Then we adapt," Kratos replied. He abandoned the Leviathan axe temporarily and drew the blades of chaos fully. "We've faced prepared enemies before. Preparation means nothing against sufficient violence." The battle resumed with renewed fury. This time, Thor and Kratos faced opponents who understood their capabilities and had been specifically designed to counter them. The massive warrior could phase through physical attacks. The speedster was fast enough to actually challenge Thor's centuries of combat experience. The energy-consuming gauntlets was forcing Thor to fight more conservatively. and Scourge himself was coordinating all of it, his 4 lightsabers creating defensive patterns that even the blades of chaos couldn't easily penetrate.
It was brutal, technical, and far more challenging than anything they'd faced since arriving in this galaxy. These weren't overconfident Sith Lords relying on force powers that didn't work. These were warriors who had trained specifically to kill beings outside the Force's reach. Blood was drawn on both sides. The speedster managed a glancing blow that opened a cut across Thor's shoulder. Kratos took another hit from the phasing warrior that cracked a rib, but the Emperor's wrath paid for every wound they inflicted. The warrior with the vibroblade lost an arm to the Leviathan axe, and the speedster was finally caught by Mjolnir and sent crashing through a building. And through it all, Scourge watched, analyzed, and adjusted his team's tactics in real time. "You're everything the Emperor hoped for," Scourge said as he blocked a strike from Kratos and deflected Thor's lightning with one of his lightsabers. "Power from beyond the Force, warriors who have killed gods, test subjects perfect for understanding how to breach dimensional barriers." "Test subjects," Thor repeated, lightning dancing along his arms despite the energy-draining warrior's best efforts. "Is that what we are to your Emperor? Experiments?" "You are tools," Scourge replied. "Tools the Emperor will use to transcend this galaxy and conquer others. Your arrival was no accident. The Emperor has been pulling at dimensional threads for decades, trying to create a rift. You simply happened to be on the other side when he finally succeeded." Kratos and Thor processed this revelation even as they fought. The rift hadn't been random chance or cosmic coincidence. The Sith Emperor had deliberately torn holes in reality, and they had fallen through. "Which meant he knows how to send us back," Kratos said. "If you survive long enough to ask him," Scourge agreed. "But first, you must pass through us, and we are the Emperor's finest." The massive warrior phased again, preparing to deliver another devastating blow to Kratos. But this time, Kratos was ready. He'd been watching, analyzing, understanding the pattern. The warrior had to solidify to actually strike. There was a moment, a fraction of a second, where he existed fully in material reality. Kratos waited for that moment. When the warrior solidified, the blades of chaos were waiting. They wrapped around him in spirals of fire, and Kratos pulled. The warrior tried to phase again, but the blades, forged in realms beyond normal physics, bound to Kratos through divine curse, refused to release. The warrior screamed as the eternal flames consumed him, his augmentations meaningless against weapons that existed partially outside reality themselves. Thor, meanwhile, had solved the energy-draining problem through simple Asgardian stubbornness. If the warrior could drain Mjolnir, then Thor would simply provide more power than could be drained. He drew on his own internal reserves, the divine spark that made him Asgardian royalty, and channeled it through the hammer until the warrior's gauntlets began to overload. The augmented Sith tried to shut down the absorption, but it was too late. Too much energy, coming too fast, with nowhere to safely discharge it. The resulting explosion painted the plaza in blue-white light and left a crater where the warrior had stood. Now it was 3 against 2. Scourge, the speedster, and the vibroblade warrior, now wielding his weapon one-handed, against Thor and Kratos. The odds were better, but these were still the Emperor's finest, and they had been trained for this specific confrontation. Above them, the storm intensified. Lightning struck the plaza in increasingly rapid succession, and the dark side energy saturating the atmosphere grew thicker, more oppressive.
Thor could feel it trying to influence him, to feed his battle fury and transform it into something darker. Kratos felt it too, the familiar whisper of rage, the seductive promise that surrendering to anger would make victory easier. They both resisted, but it was a constant drain on their concentration. "The planet itself fights for him," Thor said. "Every moment we spend here, we risk corruption." "Then we end this quickly," Kratos replied.
They attacked in unison, abandoning defensive tactics in favor of overwhelming offense. Thor became a lightning storm incarnate, Mjolnir striking with the force of thunder itself. Kratos moved with the cold efficiency of death, every motion designed to kill. The speedster fell first, unable to dodge both warriors simultaneously. The vibroblade warrior lasted longer, his augmented strength allowing him to match Kratos blow for blow until Thor's hammer caught him from the blind side. Then it was just Scourge. The Emperor's wrath stood alone in the center of the plaza, his 4 lightsabers still active, his armor scorched and damaged, but his stance unwavering. Around him, the plaza was a war zone, craters, burning wreckage, bodies of fallen Sith. The storm raged overhead, and in the distance, more Sith forces could be seen mobilizing. "You've won this engagement," Scourge acknowledged, "but the Emperor has seen what he needed to see. He understands your capabilities now, and when you reach the Citadel, if you reach the Citadel, you will find he has prepared accordingly." "Then we will break whatever preparations he has made," Thor said simply. "We have broken God's defenses before." Scourge's laugh was bitter. "You still don't understand. The Emperor isn't a god of your realms. He's something older, something that has transcended mortality itself through pure will and dark power. He has waited 1,000 years for beings like you. Do you truly believe he hasn't prepared for every contingency?" Kratos stepped forward, the Leviathan axe raised. "Then he will learn what all tyrants learn, that no preparation survives contact with those who have nothing left to lose." For a moment, Scourge seemed to consider continuing the fight. Then he deactivated his lightsabers and took a step back. "The Emperor awaits you in the Citadel. If you survive the journey there, perhaps you'll understand why we serve him willingly, why even beings who could resist his power choose not to." He activated a personal cloaking device and vanished, leaving Thor and Kratos alone in the ruined plaza. The storm continued to rage, and in the distance, the massive pyramid of the Sith Citadel loomed against the dark sky, lightning playing across its peak in patterns that suggested purpose rather than natural discharge. Somewhere in that structure, the Sith Emperor waited. And for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, both warriors felt something that might have been doubt. Not fear, they had faced fear and conquered it countless times, but uncertainty, a sense that they were walking into something beyond even their considerable experience. They began walking toward the Citadel anyway, because uncertainty or not, doubt or not, they had killed gods before, and they would do so again if necessary. The citizens of Kaz City watched from windows and hiding places as the two warriors passed through their streets, and they would remember this day for generations, the day two gods walked through the heart of the Sith Empire and left devastation in their wake.
The streets of Kaz City were a monument to authoritarian order twisted by dark ambition. Massive statues of long-dead Sith lords loomed over thoroughfares wide enough to march entire battalions through. Buildings constructed of black stone rose in angular, oppressive designs that seemed calculated to make anyone walking below feel insignificant. And everywhere, carved into walls and inlaid into streets, were Sith runes that pulsed with faint red luminescence, not decoration, but functional elements of a city-wide dark-side network. Thor and Kratos moved through these streets like a storm front, and the city's inhabitants fled before them. Not soldiers now. The military forces had pulled back after Scourge's withdrawal, forming defensive perimeters around strategic locations. These were civilians, if such a term applied to citizens of the Sith Empire. Humans, Twi'leks, Zabraks, and dozens of other species, all bearing the haunted expressions of those who lived under absolute tyranny. "They fear us more than they fear their own masters," Thor observed, as a group of workers abandoned their posts and disappeared into side streets. "What kind of empire rules through such terror?" "An effective one," Kratos replied coldly. "Fear is a simple tool, crude but reliable." He paused at an intersection where Sith propaganda covered an entire wall. Images of the Emperor's symbol, declarations of eternal dominion, promises that service to the Empire would be rewarded. "I have seen it before," Kratos said. "Ares ruled Sparta through fear. Zeus maintained Olympus through it. Fear works until someone refuses to be afraid." They continued toward the citadel, following the massive pyramid silhouette against the storm-racked sky. The journey should have taken hours on foot, but the Sith forces seemed content to simply monitor their progress rather than engage. Patrol craft circled overhead at careful distances. Snipers tracked them from rooftops, but didn't fire. Squads of soldiers withdrew whenever Thor and Kratos approached their positions. It was tactical withdrawal masquerading as cowardice, allowing the enemy to advance deeper into controlled territory where every advantage belonged to the defender. "They're hurting us," Kratos said, noting how their path was subtly constrained by the positioning of Sith forces. "Every street that remains open leads toward the citadel. Every route that diverges is blocked." "Let them," Thor replied. "We came here to face their emperor. If he wishes to control the battlefield, so be it. We've fought on enemy ground before." They passed through what appeared to be a market district, though calling it a market was generous. Citizens lined up in orderly queues to receive rations from imperial distribution centers, while Sith overseers watched for any sign of disorder. This was not a prosperous empire sharing its wealth. This was extraction and control, taking everything and returning the bare minimum to keep the population functional. One overseer, a human Sith apprentice with the yellow-tinged eyes of dark-side corruption, made the mistake of trying to assert authority as Thor and Kratos passed. "You will stop," and Kratos didn't even slow down. One hand shot out, caught the apprentice by the throat, and lifted him from his feet. "Your empire has made an error," Kratos said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent market square. "It has assumed that because we came seeking knowledge, we would tolerate its existence. That assumption was wrong." He dropped the apprentice, who collapsed gasping. The message was clear. Thor and Kratos were not diplomats or suppliants. They were conquerors passing through territory that belonged to them by right of superior force. The citadel grew larger as they approached, and its true scale became apparent. The pyramid was easily a kilometer on each side at its base, and rose perhaps half that distance into the storm-filled sky. Its surface was smooth black stone, covered in carved Sith script that glowed with internal crimson light. Lightning from the perpetual storm struck the pyramid's peak every few seconds, and the energy was channeled down through those carved runes into the structure's depths. "The entire building is a dark side conduit," Thor said, feeling the flow of corrupted energy even from this distance, drawing power from the storm, from the planet itself, channeling it inward. "To the Emperor," Kratos finished. "This entire world exists to feed him power." The main entrance was guarded, but not in the way they'd expected. Instead of armies or defensive emplantments, a single figure stood before the massive doors. Humanoid in shape, but wrong in ways that defied easy description. The proportions were slightly off, the movements too fluid, and the presence in the force was simultaneously overwhelming and completely absent, as if the figure existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. "A Sith phantom," the figure said, and its voice echoed from multiple directions simultaneously. "The Emperor's will given form without flesh. You have proven yourselves worthy of audience. The eternal throne awaits." The massive doors, each one easily 50 feet tall and carved from solid stone, began to open. The sound was like the grinding of continental plates, and from within came a wave of dark-side energy so concentrated it was visible as a purple-black mist rolling out across the ground. Thor and Kratos exchanged one final glance before stepping through the doors into the Sith Citadel. The interior was vast beyond reason, as if the pyramid's outer dimensions were merely suggestion. The entrance hall stretched for what seemed like miles, lined with statues of ancient Sith lords whose stone eyes seemed to track movement. The ceiling was lost in darkness above, and the floor was polished obsidian that reflected distorted images, not of Thor and Kratos as they were, but twisted versions showing possible futures where they knelt before the Emperor, where they became his servants, where they died screaming. "Illusions," Kratos said, refusing to look down. "Meant to break will before the battle even begins."
"Aye," Thor agreed. "The Emperor fights with psychology as much as power. He seeks to make us defeat ourselves before we face him." They walked forward, and the statues began to move, not attacking, but shifting position, creating an honor guard that seemed to escort them deeper into the citadel. Whispers filled the air, voices speaking in languages neither warrior recognized, promising power, threatening death, offering bargains that would send them home if only they served the Emperor's will. "Your Asgard burns," the whispers told Thor. "The Dark Elves return with weapons that will unravel the 9 realms. Your father Odin grows weak, and your brother Loki plots betrayal. You should be there, protecting your people. The Emperor can send you back if you serve." "Sparta awaits its god of war," other voices told Kratos. "Your son grows without his father's guidance. The Norse realms face threats you cannot imagine. Your family's ghosts cry out for justice that you cannot provide while trapped here. Serve the Emperor and return to them." Both warriors continued walking, their expressions unchanged. They had heard similar promises before from beings far more convincing than disembodied whispers in a dark temple. The entrance hall finally ended at another set of doors, these smaller but more ornate, covered in gold inlay forming Sith script that pulsed with active power. The phantom that had greeted them materialized before the doors. "Beyond this threshold, the Emperor's presence is absolute. The dark side nexus focuses here, amplified 1,000-fold. Beings who enter this sanctum unprepared have their minds shattered, their wills subsumed, their very identities dissolved into the Emperor's consciousness." The phantom's eyeless face somehow managed to convey scrutiny. "You are not connected to the Force. That is your greatest protection and your greatest vulnerability. The Emperor cannot touch your minds directly, but the Nexus itself may prove overwhelming."
"We've walked through worse," Kratos said flatly. "Helheim's frozen heart, the deepest pits of Tartarus, the void between realms where reality itself ceases to exist. Your dark side nexus holds no terror for us." "We shall see," the Phantom replied, and the doors opened. The chamber beyond defied architecture and geometry. It was simultaneously vast and claustrophobic, dark and blindingly bright, silent and filled with the screaming of 1,000 tortured souls. The walls, if they could be called walls, seemed to shift and flow like liquid stone, and the ceiling was a window into what might have been space, or might have been the raw chaos of the dark side itself. And in the center, on a throne carved from what appeared to be solidified shadow, sat the Sith Emperor. He was smaller than expected, almost frail-looking, with pale skin stretched tight over ancient bones and robes that hung loosely on his wasted frame. But his eyes burned with yellow light so intense it left afterimages, and the power radiating from him was palpable even to beings outside the Force's reach. This was not merely a powerful Force user, this was something that had transcended mortality, that existed in a state between life and death, that had accumulated centuries of dark side power until it saturated his very existence. "Thor Odinson, Kratos of Sparta, at last we meet face to face. Do you know how long I have waited for this moment? How many centuries I have studied the boundaries between dimensions, searching for proof that other realities existed?" He stood slowly, and despite his frail appearance, the movement carried terrible weight. "You are that proof. You are the key to everything I have worked toward." Thor planted Mjolnir before him. "We have not come to serve your ambitions, Emperor. We came for answers. How did you create the rift that brought us here, and how do we return home?" The Emperor's laugh was like breaking glass. "Return home? Why would you wish to return to dying realms when the entirety of existence awaits conquest? I have seen glimpses of your worlds through dimensional tears. Asgard grows complacent under Odin's rule. The Greek pantheon lies in ruins, destroyed by your hand, Kratos. Both your realms face threats that will consume them while you waste your time here." He raised one withered hand, and the chamber's walls suddenly displayed images, visions pulled from across dimensional barriers. Asgard under siege by forces unknown, Norse realms burning as Ragnarok's prophecy played out, Kratos' son Atreus facing dangers alone. The visions were detailed, specific, and carried the weight of truth. "I can send you back," the Emperor said softly. "I can open dimensional rifts at will now, thanks to the data I've gathered from your arrival. You could return to your realms, defend your people, fulfill your oaths." He stepped down from his throne, and with each step, the dark side energy in the chamber intensified. "I require your service in exchange. Fight for the Sith Empire. Conquer this galaxy in my name. And when we are finished here, we will move to the next reality, and the next, until all dimensions bow before the eternal throne." Kratos' expression didn't change. "You offer us what we already planned to take by force. The only difference is you expect us to serve you willingly." He drew the blades of chaos. "We don't serve tyrants, we kill them." "Then you doom your realms," the Emperor replied, and for the first time, genuine emotion entered his voice, satisfaction. "Because I will not send you home. I will keep you here, trapped in this galaxy, while your worlds burn and your families die. And eventually, when you have nothing left to fight for, you will serve me anyway, because service will be preferable to eternal imprisonment." Thor's eyes blazed with lightning. "You underestimate us, Emperor. We have broken chains forged by gods. We have defied destinies written in the stars themselves. Your threats mean nothing." "Then let us dispense with words," the Emperor said, and the chamber transformed. The throne room dissolved like smoke in the wind, and Thor and Kratos found themselves standing in a place that existed between thought and reality. The dark side nexus had been unleashed in its purest form, not as physical force, but as psychological assault, a weapon designed to strip away identity and replace it with the Emperor's will. Around Thor materialized Asgard's golden halls, but they were burning. His father, Odin, lay dead on the throne, Mjolnir shattered at his feet. His mother, Frigga, wept over the corpse while dark elves poured through breached gates. And standing over it all was Thor himself, or rather, a version of Thor who had failed, who had been trapped in this alien galaxy while his home burned, who watched helplessly as everything he'd sworn to protect was destroyed. "This is your future," the Emperor's voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere. "If you refuse me, this is what awaits. Your absence will doom Asgard. Your pride will kill your family." Thor closed his eyes and breathed. In his long life, he had faced many illusions: Loki's tricks, the enchantress's spells, the reality-warping powers of beings far beyond mortal comprehension. He had learned to distinguish truth from manipulation through one simple principle: emotional manipulation was always too perfectly designed to break you. "This is not precognition," Thor said calmly, opening his eyes. "This is fear given form. You show me what I already fear, Emperor, thinking that seeing it will break my will. But I am Asgardian. We face our fears and fight anyway." He raised Mjolnir, and the burning vision of Asgard shattered like glass. Beside him, Kratos stood in a different hell. Not Asgard, but Sparta, his home as it had been before the gods corrupted it. His wife Lysandra and daughter Calliope stood before him, alive and whole and smiling. They reached out to him, offering forgiveness for all his crimes, promising that if he simply knelt before the Emperor and served, they could be returned to him. Reality could be rewritten. His family is restored. "I can give them back to you," the Emperor whispered. "My power reaches across dimensions, across time itself. Serve me, and I will undo your greatest sin. Your family will live again." For a moment, just one terrible moment, Kratos wanted to believe it. The weight of his guilt was a burden he had carried for so long that the promise of release was almost irresistible. To have his family back, to undo the moment of madness when Ares had tricked him into killing them. But Kratos had spent years learning one brutal truth: the past could not be changed, only accepted. His family was dead by his own hand, and no power in any reality could truly undo that. Any resurrection would be a lie, a mockery, an insult to their memory. "They are dead because of my actions," Kratos said, his voice like grinding stone, "and I carry that weight because it is mine to carry. You offer me false comfort, Emperor, but I did not survive the fall of Olympus by accepting comfortable lies. The blades of chaos ignited with fury. I survived by accepting hard truths and fighting anyway." The vision of his family dissolved, their final expressions not of accusation, but of pride. His own mind, he realized, rejecting the Emperor's manipulation with the truth of who they had been. The throne room snapped back into focus. The Emperor stood before his throne, and for the first time, his expression showed something other than absolute confidence, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even concern. "You resist the visions," he said slowly. "Most beings shown their deepest fears or desires break immediately, but you," his eyes narrowed, "you've been broken before, haven't you? Both of you.
shattered and rebuilt so many times that mere psychological manipulation no longer works. You've each already faced your worst nightmares and survived. We have, Thor confirmed. I have been cast down from Asgard, stripped of my power, forced to live as a mortal and learn humility. I have watched friends die. I have made choices that haunt me. Your illusions are nothing compared to the weight of actual failure. And I have murdered my own family, Kratos added bluntly. I have destroyed an entire pantheon of gods. I have remade myself from a monster into something resembling a man. Whatever horrors you can show me, I have already lived worse. The Emperor was silent for a long moment, and the dark side energy in the chamber shifted from psychological assault to something more physical, more immediate. The temperature dropped until frost formed on the walls, then spiked until the air shimmered with heat. Gravity fluctuated, becoming crushing, then weightless, then normal again. Reality itself became unstable as the Emperor exerted his will on the fundamental laws of physics. Then we proceed to more direct methods, the Emperor said. He raised both hands, and the dark side coalesced into visible form, tendrils of purple-black energy that writhed like living things, reaching toward Thor and Kratos with hungry intent. The tendrils struck, and both warriors felt agony unlike anything they'd experienced in this galaxy. This wasn't force lightning or telekinetic pressure. This was the dark side's essence itself, pure corrupted energy that sought to unmake them at a fundamental level. Where it touched, flesh burned and nerves screamed. The pain was designed not just to harm, but to break will, to make surrender seem preferable to continued resistance. Thor closed his teeth and pushed back with his own power. Lightning erupted from his body, not Dromund Kaas corrupted storm energy, but pure Asgardian thunder drawn from his own divine nature. The electrical discharge met the dark side tendrils, and the two forces clashed, neither giving ground. Thor could feel the Emperor's power testing him, probing for weaknesses, trying to find a way past his godly durability.
Kratos took a different approach. Instead of fighting the dark side energy directly, he simply endured it. Pain was an old companion. He had suffered tortures in the pits of Hades, had been impaled by the blade of Olympus, had walked through agony that would kill lesser beings. This was terrible, yes, but it was not insurmountable. He walked forward through the dark side assault, step by deliberate step, the Leviathan axe gripped in hands that refused to shake despite the pain. "Impossible," the Emperor hissed. "No being can simply walk through pure dark side energy. It should be consuming you, corrupting you, breaking you." "We are not beings of your galaxy," Kratos replied through gritted teeth. "Your force has no leverage over us. We exist outside its rules." He raised the Leviathan axe, "And that is why you will fall, Emperor, because for all your power, for all your centuries of accumulated strength, you are still bound by the laws of this reality. We are not." He hurled the axe. The weapon crossed the distance in a blur of frost and fury. The Emperor raised a hand to deflect it with the force, and the axe simply ignored the telekinetic barrier. It struck the Emperor in the chest, and for the first time in perhaps 1,000 years, the ancient Sith Lord felt physical pain. The dark side tendrils dissolved as the Emperor staggered backward, one withered hand clutching at the axe embedded in his chest. Black ichor leaked from the wound, not blood exactly, but something that might have been blood once, before centuries of dark side corruption transformed it into something else. "You dare!" the Emperor gasped, and his voice carried genuine shock. Thor was already moving. Mjolnir spun in his hand, building momentum, and he released it with all the force he could muster. The hammer struck the Emperor like a thunderbolt, tearing the ancient Sith from his throne and hurling him across the chamber. He crashed into the far wall hard enough to crater the stone, and when he pulled himself from the impact site, his frail body was broken in multiple places. But he was still alive, still moving, still radiating power. "You think physical injury matters to me?" The Emperor's laugh was wet and terrible. "I transcended mere flesh centuries ago. This body is just a vessel, a focus for my true existence. You cannot kill me with weapons, Godslayers. I am eternal." He raised both hands, and the entire citadel shuddered. The dark side nexus, the accumulated power of 1,000 years, channeled through every rune carved into the pyramid structure, activated fully. Energy cascaded through the chamber in waves, and the Emperor began to change. His broken body knitted itself back together, bones realigning and flesh regenerating. But more than that, he began to grow, not physically, but existentially. His presence expanded to fill the entire chamber, and his power saturated every molecule of air. "I am not simply a Sith Lord," the Emperor declared, his voice now layered with harmonics that suggested multiple beings speaking in unison. "I am the dark side made manifest. I am the culmination of centuries of Sith evolution. I am the eternal will that has shaped this galaxy's destiny." The chamber walls began to crack as reality itself struggled to contain his power. Thor and Kratos stood side by side, weapons ready, facing down a being who had just revealed himself to be something far beyond what they'd anticipated. Not just a powerful force user, but something that had merged with the dark side itself, that existed partially outside normal reality. "We've faced this before," Thor said quietly to Kratos, "beings who claimed to transcend mortality, who said they couldn't be killed. And we killed them anyway," Kratos finished, "because nothing is truly immortal. Everything that exists can be ended. You simply need to find the right way to do it." The Emperor attacked with the full force of his accumulated power. The chamber became a maelstrom of dark side energy. Gravity collapsed into crushing pressure. Time dilated until seconds stretched like hours. Reality fractured into overlapping possibilities where they were simultaneously fighting and dead and fleeing and serving. The assault was total, absolute, designed to overwhelm every sense in defense. Thor summoned lightning on a scale he rarely unleashed, the kind of electrical fury he'd used to jumpstart dead stars and shatter worlds. It collided with the Emperor's dark side storm, and the collision was visible as a sphere of crackling energy expanding outward from their position. The citadel's walls cracked further, and somewhere in the distance, structural supports began to fail. Kratos activated Spartan rage. The transformation was instantaneous. His eyes blazed with crimson light, and power that had nothing to do with the Force flooded his body. This was divine fury, channeled and controlled, the accumulated rage of a god who had toppled pantheons. In this state, Kratos was functionally unstoppable. Pain meant nothing, injury was ignored, and his strength increased to levels that defied measurement. He charged through the dark side maelstrom like it didn't exist. The Emperor's reality-warping attacks simply failed to affect him. Spartan rage burned through illusions and forced Kratos' existence to remain solid and immutable. The blades of chaos extended to their full reach, and Kratos leaped, covering the distance to the Emperor in a single bound. The ancient Sith Lord raised barriers, force shields layered a dozen deep, each one capable of stopping capital ship weapons. Kratos' blades shattered them like glass. The Emperor attempted to phase out of reality, to exist briefly in a state where physical attacks couldn't reach him. The blades of chaos, forged in Greek hell and bound to Kratos through curse and covenant, followed him into that between space and dragged him back. "Impossible," the Emperor screamed, and for the first time his voice carried genuine fear. "You are mortal, physical beings. You cannot follow me into—" Kratos' response was to wrap the blades around the Emperor's frail body and pull. The ancient Sith Lord was yanked forward, and Kratos headbutted him with enough force to shatter the corrupted skull. Black ichor sprayed across the chamber floor. Thor arrived a moment later, Mjolnir raised high. "You claimed to be eternal, Emperor. Let us test that claim." The hammer fell. The impact point detonated in an explosion of lightning and pulverized stone. The Emperor's body disintegrated, reduced to ash and dark side energy that dissipated into the corrupted atmosphere. For a moment, silence filled the chamber, the kind of terrible quiet that follows overwhelming violence. Then, the entire citadel began to shake. "He's not dead," Kratos said, Spartan rage fading, but leaving him still battle-ready. "That was just his physical form. His true existence is bound to this place, to the dark side nexus itself." The Emperor's voice echoed from everywhere at once, no longer localized to a physical body. "Clever, God-slayer. You understand now. I am not merely a being who wields the dark side. I have become part of it. My consciousness is distributed throughout this entire structure, through the very foundations of Dromund Kaas itself. You cannot kill what has transcended individual existence." The chamber walls dissolved, revealing the true nature of the citadel's interior. It was vast beyond comprehension, filled with machinery and Sith artifacts, all connected by crackling dark side energy. And at the center, pulsing with terrible power, was a massive crystalline structure, the Nexus Core, where the Emperor's consciousness was anchored. "To kill me," the Emperor's disembodied voice taunted, "you would need to destroy the Nexus itself, but doing so would unleash all the accumulated dark side energy at once, enough power to level this city, perhaps this entire continent. Thousands would die, innocents who have committed no crime except being born in the Empire." The voice carried cruel satisfaction. "So you see, you cannot win. Kill me and become mass murderers. Spare me and remain trapped here forever. Choose." Thor and Kratos stood before the pulsing Nexus Core, understanding the impossible choice before them. This was the Emperor's final trap, not physical power, but moral compromise. Force them to choose between their principles and their objectives. They looked at each other, and in that moment, warrior understanding passed between them. They had both faced similar choices before, moments where the right action carried terrible cost, where victory demanded sacrifice that haunted them afterward. "There is a third option," Kratos said quietly. "Aye," Thor agreed, understanding immediately. "We contain it." The Emperor's laughter echoed through the vast chamber, confident and cruel. "Contain it? You propose to contain centuries of accumulated dark side energy, the combined power of 1,000 years of Sith ritual and sacrifice?" The disembodied voice dripped with contempt. "You are powerful, God-slayers, but you are not that powerful. The Nexus Core contains energy equivalent to a dying star. Release it, and it will consume everything within 100 kilometers." Thor studied the crystalline structure, his mind working through the problem with the tactical acumen of Asgard's finest warrior and the scientific understanding he'd gained from centuries of exposure to advanced technology and magic. The Nexus wasn't just containing energy, it was channeling it, directing it, using it to sustain the Emperor's distributed consciousness across the entire citadel. "The energy needs an outlet," Thor said, circling the Nexus slowly. It's been accumulating for centuries because the Emperor has been drawing on it continuously, using it to extend his life and power. But if we provide a different outlet, a direction for the energy to discharge that isn't catastrophic, we become the outlet. Kratos finished. His expression was grim. We absorb the energy ourselves, channel it through our own bodies, and dissipate it harmlessly. That is suicide, the Emperor declared, though his voice now carried a note of uncertainty. You are not force-sensitive. You have no ability to safely channel dark side energy. It will corrupt you, consume you, tear you apart from the inside. You will die screaming, and then I will simply reconstitute myself from what remains of the Nexus. Perhaps, Thor acknowledged, or perhaps you underestimate what it means to be Asgardian. I have channeled the energy of neutron stars. I have withstood the Bifrost's dimensional transit energies. My body is a conduit for forces that would vaporize lesser beings. He planted Mjolnir before the Nexus. And if I am wrong, at least I will die ensuring you die with me. Kratos moved to the opposite side of the Nexus, the Leviathan axe gripped firmly. I have carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. I have withstood the tortures of Hades and walked through the flames of destruction that ended Olympus. I am the ghost of Sparta, and I do not yield. He met Thor's gaze across the pulsing crystalline structure. Together? Together, Thor confirmed. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Now. Both warriors struck the Nexus simultaneously, Mjolnir and the Leviathan axe impacting the crystalline structure at precisely calculated points. The core didn't shatter, but cracked, hairline fractures spreading across its surface. And through those fractures, dark side energy began to pour out in torrents. The Emperor's scream of rage filled the citadel. "No! What have you done?" What they had done was impossible by any conventional understanding. The dark side energy, raw, corrupted, concentrated to levels that should have instantly annihilated any organic matter it touched, flooded into Thor and Kratos. It should have killed them, should have corrupted their souls and transformed them into twisted servants of the dark side. Instead, they endured. Thor gritted his teeth as the dark side energy coursed through his Asgardian physiology. It was agony beyond description, every cell in his body screaming as corrupted force energy tried to rewrite his fundamental nature. The dark side whispered promises of power, showed him visions of conquering not just this galaxy, but all galaxies, offered him the strength to protect Asgard forever if he simply surrendered to the corruption. He refused. Every teaching Odin had ever given him, every lesson learned through humility and loss, every moment of growth from arrogant prince to worthy king, all of it formed a bulwark against the corruption. He was not a force user to be twisted by the dark side. He was Asgardian, divine by nature, and his essence was his own. The energy continued to flow through him, and Thor began to transform it, not absorbing it or containing it, but converting it, using his own divine nature as a filter to strip away the corruption and release pure energy back into the universe. Lightning erupted from his body, but this lightning was different. Purple-black at first, as it carried traces of the dark side, then gradually shifting to blue-white as Thor's will purified it. Beside him, Kratos underwent his own trial. The dark side energy found fertile ground in his guilt, his rage, his history of violence. It showed him Lysandra and Calliope again, but this time accusing him, blaming him, cursing him for the monster he had been. It showed him every atrocity he'd committed, every innocent who had died because of his quest for vengeance against the gods. "Yes," Kratos said through gritted teeth, accepting it all. "I am responsible for every death, every tragedy. I carry that weight, and I will carry it until I die." His eyes blazed with determination. "But I am not that monster anymore. I learned, I changed, I became something more than simple rage." The blades of chaos flared with intense light as dark side energy poured through them. The cursed weapons drank in the dark energy and transformed it, burning away the corruption through their eternal flames and releasing it as harmless heat and light. The Emperor watched in mounting horror as his million years of accumulated power was systematically dismantled by two beings who should not have been able to survive even seconds of exposure to such concentrated dark side energy. Impossible! The Emperor's voice was weakening now, his distributed consciousness losing coherence as the Nexus drained. The dark side is absolute. It corrupts all who touch it. You should be mine, my servants, my weapons, my... Your mistake, Thor interrupted, his voice strained but steady as rivers of dark energy continued to flow through him. The dark side binds this galaxy, but nothing could exist beyond its rules. But we are not of this galaxy, Emperor. We exist outside your force, and that is why we can do what no Jedi or Sith could ever accomplish.
We are breaking your chains, Kratos added, and the symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. Both warriors had spent their lives breaking chains, literal and metaphorical, that gods and tyrants had placed upon them and others. The Nexus core's cracks widened, spreading across the entire crystalline structure. The dark side energy's flow increased to a torrent, and both warriors were pushed to their absolute limits. Thor's body was wreathed in lightning so intense the stone beneath his feet melted. Kratos' form was barely visible through the flames that consumed the dark energy flowing through the blades of chaos. The citadel itself began to collapse. Without the Nexus to sustain it, the dark side energy that had reinforced every stone and supported its impossible geometry was failing. Sections of the pyramid's interior fell away into darkness, and the storm outside intensified to apocalyptic levels. You've destroyed everything. The Emperor's voice was barely a whisper now, his consciousness fragmenting. 1,000 years of work, of sacrifice, all undone by two mortals. We are not mortal, Thor corrected, his voice carrying absolute authority despite his obvious strain. We are gods, and we do not kneel to tyrants, no matter how long they've ruled or how much power they've accumulated. The Nexus core reached critical failure. The crystalline structure exploded in a final discharge of dark side energy, a wave that would have leveled Ka City and killed everyone within. But Thor and Kratos stood at the epicenter, their bodies serving as lightning rods for the blast. The energy crashed into them, through them, and was transformed by their very natures into harmless discharge that dissipated into the atmosphere above. When the light faded, the Nexus was gone, completely destroyed, nothing remaining but dust and fading energy signatures. The Emperor's presence, that terrible weight that had pressed down on every living thing on Drummond Kaas, was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. Thor and Kratos stood in the ruins of the throne room, their bodies smoking and damaged but intact. Thor's armor was scorched black, and Kratos' skin showed burns that would have killed any normal being. But they were alive, and they had won. The Emperor, Thor said, looking around the destroyed chamber. Dead, Kratos confirmed. His consciousness was bound to the Nexus. When we destroyed it, we destroyed him. He paused, then added with grim satisfaction, permanently this time. The citadel groaned, and another section of the structure collapsed nearby. The pyramid was falling apart, its dark side reinforcement gone, leaving only mundane stone that couldn't support its own impossible weight. We need to leave. This entire structure is coming down. They ran through the collapsing citadel, dodging falling debris and leaping over chasms that opened in the floor. Behind them, the Emperor's throne room, and with it 1,000 years of accumulated dark-side artifacts and knowledge, was buried under tons of rubble. They emerged from the citadel's entrance just as the pyramid's peak began to collapse.
The massive structure folded in on itself in a cascading failure, each level falling onto the one below it with thunderous crashes. Dust and debris billowed outward, and the ground shook with seismic force. The citizens of Ka City, those who hadn't already fled, stopped and stared at the impossible sight. The Sith Citadel, the seat of the Emperor's power, the structure that had dominated their skyline for generations, was being reduced to rubble. And walking away from it, silhouetted against the destruction, were two figures whose very presence radiated power. Thor and Kratos stood in the center of a plaza filled with Sith soldiers who were preparing to defend the citadel. But now those soldiers just stared, their weapons lowered, their expressions showing confusion and the first stirrings of something that might have been hope. "The Emperor is dead," Thor announced, his voice carrying across the plaza with divine authority. "His reign of tyranny is ended. This world is free." For a long moment, no one moved. The concept was too large, too impossible to immediately grasp. The Emperor had ruled for 1,000 years. Generations had lived and died knowing nothing but his absolute authority. The idea that he could simply be gone was beyond comprehension. Then one Sith soldier, a young human woman whose armor showed signs of hasty promotion and whose eyes still held traces of fear, dropped her weapon. Then another, then dozens, then hundreds. The clatter of falling weapons echoed across the plaza as an entire garrison realized they no longer had to fight, no longer had to serve, no longer had to fear the Emperor's wrath for any perceived failure. Some collapsed to their knees, overwhelmed by sudden liberation. Others simply stood frozen, unable to process what had happened. And a few, the true believers, those who had embraced the Sith philosophy fully, looked at Thor and Kratos with hatred and began backing away, already planning how to preserve what they could of the Empire. "This galaxy's politics are no longer our concern," Kratos said quietly to Thor. "We came for answers about the rift. The Emperor claimed to understand dimensional barriers. We need to search what remains of his knowledge before we leave this world."
Thor nodded, then turned to address the assembled soldiers again. "The Emperor claimed to possess knowledge of dimensional rifts, of ways to breach the barriers between realities. We seek that knowledge. Anyone who can direct us to his archives, his research, his artifacts, will be rewarded. Anyone who attempts to stop us—" He let the threat hang unspoken but clear. An older Sith, a pureblood with scars that spoke of decades of service, stepped forward hesitantly. "The Emperor's personal research was kept in the sanctum beneath the citadel, but—" he gestured at the collapsed pyramid. "It's buried now. It would take weeks to excavate, and without the dark side reinforcement, the structure could collapse further at any moment." Kratos looked at Thor. "We don't have weeks. If the Republic learns what happened here, they'll send forces to occupy the planet, and others in the Sith hierarchy will try to claim power. This window of opportunity is brief." "Then we make our own entrance," Thor said. He raised Mjolnir, and lightning began to gather around him. Not the corrupted storm energy of Dromund Kaas, but pure Asgardian power, drawn from his own divine nature. "Stand back, all of you." The crowd scattered as Thor unleashed a concentrated lightning strike into the rubble where the citadel's foundations had been. The electrical energy wasn't designed to destroy, but to tunnel, melting stone and vaporizing debris, creating a path downward through the collapsed structure. It took nearly an hour of sustained effort, with Kratos using the Leviathan axe to freeze and shatter particularly stubborn sections of rubble, but eventually they broke through into a chamber that had somehow survived the collapse, the Emperor's personal sanctum, exactly as the Sith soldier had described. The room was relatively small, almost intimate compared to the throne room's vastness, but every surface was covered with artifacts and documentation, holocrons stacked in careful rows, ancient texts preserved behind energy fields, and at the center, a massive terminal displaying data in Sith script that neither Thor nor Kratos could read.
"We need someone who can interpret this," Thor said, studying the terminal. "Neither of us speaks or reads their language." As if summoned by the need, a figure appeared at the entrance of the chamber, Bastila Shan, accompanied by a small team of Republic soldiers. She looked exhausted, her robes scorched, and her lightsaber hilt showing signs of recent combat, but her eyes were alert and determined. "We felt it. Every Jedi and Sith in the galaxy felt it. The Emperor's presence in the Force just vanished, like a star going supernova and then leaving only void." She looked at Thor and Kratos with an expression mixing awe and wariness. "What did you do?" "We killed him, destroyed the nexus that sustained his consciousness. He's gone, permanently." Bastila processed this for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "The Republic will want to question you. The Jedi Council will have concerns about beings powerful enough to kill the Sith Emperor, and the Empire—" She glanced toward the Sanctum's entrance, where sounds of growing chaos could be heard from the city above. "The Empire is fragmenting. Dark Council members are already declaring themselves the new Emperor. Civil war is beginning." "None of that matters to us. We need to understand this data. Can you read Sith script?" Bastila moved to the terminal, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Some of it. The Emperor kept his most sensitive research in code, but the basic organization—" Her eyes widened as she began parsing the information. "This is— He really did it. He mapped dimensional barriers, found weak points in reality where rifts could be forced open." She looked up at them. "This is the research that brought you here, and theoretically, it's everything you'd need to return home." The Sanctum fell silent except for the soft hum of the terminal and the distant sounds of chaos from the city above. Bastila's fingers continued to work across the controls, her expression growing more troubled with each passing moment as she delved deeper into the Emperor's research. "This is disturbing," she said quietly. "The Emperor didn't just study dimensional rifts academically. He conducted experiments, tried to tear holes in reality by force, using massive dark side rituals and the life energy of thousands of sacrifices." She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. "Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries." Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. "To conquer other realities," Kratos added, his voice flat. "We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy." Bastila nodded grimly. "According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors." She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. "Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries." Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. "To conquer other realities," Kratos added, his voice flat. "We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy." Bastila nodded grimly. "According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors. She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries. Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. "To conquer other realities," Kratos added, his voice flat. "We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy." Bastila nodded grimly. "According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors." She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries. Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. "To conquer other realities," Kratos added, his voice flat. "We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy." Bastila nodded grimly. "According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors." She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries. Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. "To conquer other realities," Kratos added, his voice flat. "We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy." Bastila nodded grimly. "According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors." She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries. Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. "To conquer other realities," Kratos added, his voice flat. "We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy." Bastila nodded grimly. "According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors." She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries.
Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. To conquer other realities, Kratos added, his voice flat. We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy. Bastila nodded grimly. According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors. She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically, entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining his methods over centuries. Thor leaned closer, studying the data with the analytical mind that had helped him understand both Asgardian magic and Midgardian science. He was searching for something specific, not just any dimensional breach, but stable pathways that could be controlled and maintained. To conquer other realities, Kratos added, his voice flat. We suspected as much. The Emperor's ambition didn't stop at this galaxy. Bastila nodded grimly. According to this, his final successful attempt, the one that brought you here, was achieved by targeting existing dimensional weaknesses. He detected energy signatures from your realms bleeding through into our reality and used them as anchors. She pulled up a holographic display showing complex dimensional mathematics overlaid with Sith alchemical symbols. Most attempts failed catastrophically, entire star systems rendered uninhabitable when the rifts collapsed incorrectly. But he kept trying, refining.
The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Bastila transmitted the Emperor's research to Republic Command, where it was analyzed by the finest minds the Republic could muster. Jedi scholars, theoretical physicists, even former Sith defectors who understood dark side rituals. The consensus was unanimous. Theoretically possible, practically insane, but if anyone could survive the attempt, it would be beings who had already survived direct exposure to a collapsing dark side nexus. Dromund Kaas descended into chaos as the news of the Emperor's death spread. The Dark Council fractured immediately, with various Sith lords declaring themselves the rightful heir to the throne. Fighting broke out across the planet as factions that had been held in check by fear of the Emperor suddenly moved to claim power. The Republic began evacuating civilians and preparing for a potential humanitarian crisis. Thor and Kratos remained apart from the politics, spending their final hours in this galaxy, preparing themselves mentally and physically for what was to come. Thor meditated in the Asgardian way, centering himself and reaching out to feel the divine spark within him, the essence that made him not just a warrior, but a god. Kratos sharpened his weapons and ran through combat forms, preparing his body and mind for the trial ahead through familiar ritual. When the time came, they boarded a Republic transport along with Bastila and a small team of Jedi and technicians. The journey to Korriban took 4 hours through hyperspace, and the planet that had been their entry point into this galaxy looked no different than when they'd left, still red and desolate, still home to ancient Sith tombs, still saturated with dark side energy. But the valley where they'd first crashed now held signs of recent activity. Republic forces had secured the area, setting up sensor equipment and energy generators according to specifications derived from the Emperor's research. In the center of the valley, where Thor and Kratos had first emerged from the rift, a circular platform had been constructed, covered in technological components and Jedi focusing crystals. Admiral Holland was present, along with Master Cao Sen Durak and several other high-ranking Republic officials. They watched as Thor and Kratos approached the platform, and the expressions ranged from respect to barely concealed relief that these unpredictable elements would soon be gone from their galaxy. "The calculations are complete," Bastila announced, reviewing her datapad one final time. "When you're ready, step onto the platform and channel your full power into the focusing array. The crystals will amplify and direct the energy according to the dimensional mathematics derived from the Emperor's research. If everything works correctly, the rift will form above the platform and remain stable for approximately 30 seconds. "And if it doesn't work correctly?" Kratos asked. Bastila met his gaze without flinching. "Then you'll be scattered across dimensional barriers, your consciousness fragmented across infinite realities. It would be unpleasant." "We've died before," Thor said with grim humor, though never quite so permanently. He turned to address the assembled Republic forces. "You have our gratitude for your assistance. Your galaxy faces difficult times ahead. The Sith Empire will not collapse quietly, and there will be those who seek to claim the Emperor's power for themselves. But you have proven yourselves worthy opponents and honorable allies." "May the Force be with you," Master Durak said formally, and several other Jedi echoed the blessing. Thor and Kratos stepped onto the platform. The focusing crystals began to hum as they sensed the proximity of massive power sources. Around the valley, Republic soldiers took defensive positions, not to attack the warriors, but to secure the perimeter in case the dimensional breach attracted unwanted attention. "Together, then," Thor said, echoing their earlier unity in the Emperor's throne room. "To the end," Kratos agreed. They began channeling their power. Thor raised Mjolnir skyward and called upon everything he was, the divine spark inherited from Odin, the accumulated power of 1,500 years of existence, the fundamental nature that made him the god of thunder. Lightning erupted from his body in cascading waves, not the controlled strikes of combat, but raw divine essence made manifest. Kratos gripped the Leviathan axe and the blades of chaos, drawing upon the power he'd taken from Olympus, the strength he'd earned through countless battles, the fundamental rage and will that had allowed him to kill gods and remake himself into something more. Frost and flame spiraled around him, mixing with Thor's lightning in a maelstrom of elemental fury. The focusing crystals screamed as power beyond their design specifications flooded through them. Several shattered immediately, but the Republic technicians had anticipated this and built redundancies into the system. The surviving crystals held, amplifying and directing the energy according to the dimensional mathematics derived from the Emperor's research. Above the platform, reality began to tear. Not the violent rending that had brought them to this galaxy, but a controlled breach, a doorway being carefully opened between dimensions. Through the expanding rift, glimpses of other realities could be seen. A rainbow bridge spanning the void of space, a massive tree whose roots and branches connected 9 distinct realms, storms of color that had no name in this galaxy. "It's working!" Bastila shouted over the roar of dimensional energies. "The rift is stabilizing."
But the cost was visible. Thor's form was becoming translucent, his very substance being converted into energy to maintain the breach. Kratos' outline wavered, his godly durability no longer sufficient to contain the power being drawn from his fundamental nature. They were burning themselves as fuel, sacrificing their divine essence to power the pathway home. The rift expanded to its full size, a circular portal perhaps 20 feet in diameter, its edges crackling with the collision of dimensional barriers.
Through it, Asgard's golden spires were visible in the distance, and the World Tree's branches stretched across alien skies. Home. After everything they'd endured, home was finally within reach. "Go!" Thor commanded through gritted teeth, "before the rift collapses." But Kratos had noticed something Thor was too focused on maintaining the breach to see. The power drain was uneven. Thor was providing perhaps 70% of the energy, burning through his divine essence faster because his Asgardian nature was more inherently magical, more compatible with dimensional manipulation. At the current rate, Thor would be completely consumed before Kratos reached critical depletion. Without hesitation, Kratos made a choice. He dropped the Leviathan axe and pressed both hands against Thor's back, directly channeling his own remaining power into the god of thunder. Not to save himself, but to ensure they both survived, or neither did. "What are you doing?" Thor gasped as Kratos' power flooded into him, stabilizing his form and redistributing the energy burden. "Ensuring we both make it home," Kratos replied. "We started this together, we end it together." The redistribution worked. Both warriors stabilized at critical but sustainable levels, their divine essences depleting at matched rates as they poured everything they were into maintaining the rift. The portal solidified, becoming stable and clear, a perfect doorway between dimensions. 20 seconds remaining, Bastila called out, monitoring the energy readings. "You need to go now!" Thor and Kratos released their power simultaneously and leaped toward the rift. For a moment, they hung suspended between dimensions, caught in the space where one reality ended and another began. They could feel the fundamental differences between the Star Wars galaxy and their own realms, the presence of the Force giving way to different cosmic structures, different fundamental laws. Then, they crossed the threshold and fell through. The last thing the Republic forces saw was two silhouettes disappearing into impossible light, and then the rift collapsed. The dimensional breach sealed itself with a sound like thunder, and reality reasserted its integrity. The focusing crystals that remained intact went dark, and the platform was scorched clean, every surface marked by exposure to power that had no place in this galaxy. "Did they make it?" Admiral Holland asked quietly. Bastila closed her eyes and reached out with the Force, trying to sense any trace of the warriors who had changed their galaxy so profoundly. But there was nothing, just void where their presences had been. They existed completely outside the Force's reach now, gone from this reality as if they'd never been. "I believe so," she said finally. "The rift remained stable long enough. They made it home." "And good riddance," one of the Republic officers muttered, though without real malice. "Let their own galaxies deal with them." But Master Durak shook his head slowly. "They were never threats to us, only to tyranny. They came to our galaxy by accident, fought our battles without obligation, and destroyed an enemy we've faced for a millennium." He looked at the scorched platform where gods had stood. "The Republic owes them a debt we can never repay, and the Sith Empire will spend generations recovering from what two warriors accomplished in days." Thor opened his eyes to find himself lying in familiar halls, Asgard's royal palace, the golden architecture unmistakable even in his disoriented state. His body felt empty, drained as if he'd spent weeks fighting without rest. Mjolnir lay beside him, its surface unmarked, but the enchantments dormant, not destroyed, but depleted, needing time to recover just as Thor himself did. He heard footsteps and managed to turn his head. Heimdall stood in the doorway, his golden eyes showing rare surprise. "My prince," the guardian of the Bifrost said quietly, "we thought you lost. The dimensional anomaly that took you occurred 3 weeks ago. The Allfather has been concerned." 3 weeks? Thor repeated, processing this. Time had moved differently between dimensions. What had felt like days in the Star Wars galaxy had been weeks in Asgard. And the realm? The threats I saw in the Emperor's visions? Are real, but contained for now, Heimdall confirmed. The Dark Elves have been quiet since your disappearance, but there are stirrings across the 9 realms, troubles that will require attention." He paused. "What happened to you, Thor? Where did you go?" Thor managed a weak smile. "To a galaxy far, far away, where I learned that even without Asgard's might behind me, I am still worthy of the power I carry." He closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him toward much-needed rest. "Wake me when the next battle begins, Heimdall. I have stories to tell." Kratos returned to consciousness in the temple where he'd first encountered the rune circle, but it was dark now, the mystical energies dissipated. His body ached with a bone-deep weariness he hadn't felt since climbing from the depths of Hades. The Leviathan axe was gone. He'd dropped it to help Thor, but the blades of chaos remained chained to his forearms, their flames reduced to barely visible embers. "Father!" Atreus burst into the temple, his young face showing relief and worry in equal measure. "You've been gone for a month. The Norns said you'd been pulled through a rift, but they couldn't see where or if you'd return." A month, longer than Thor's 3 weeks, but then time between dimensions was never consistent. Kratos allowed himself a moment of relief at seeing his son safe, then forced himself to his feet despite his body's protests. "I traveled far, boy," he said, his voice hoarse, "to a place where different gods held power, where wars raged across more stars than we have trees in Midgard." He looked at his son, seeing the questions in his eyes. "I learned that no matter how far one travels, tyranny wears the same face, and those who fight it carry the same burdens." "Did you win?" Atreus asked simply. Kratos thought of the Sith Emperor, of Dromund Kaas freed from 1,000 years of tyranny, of a galaxy changed by the presence of 2 warriors who refused to kneel. "Yes," he said finally, "we won." "We?" Atreus's eyes widened. "You weren't alone?" "No," Kratos confirmed, and for the first time in years, something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "I fought alongside another warrior, one who understood the weight of duty and the cost of power." He began walking toward the temple's exit, Atreus falling in step beside him. "Come, we have work to do here, and I have been absent too long." As they left the temple, neither Kratos nor Thor, waking in Asgard's halls, knew if they would ever see each other again. The dimensional barriers had been sealed, the rift closed, their connection to the Star Wars galaxy severed. But they would remember fighting side by side against impossible odds, remember the brief unity of 2 warriors from different realities who shared the same purpose. And in the Star Wars galaxy, the legend would grow. Tales of 2 godslayers who appeared from nowhere, killed the Eternal Emperor, and vanished back into myth. Some would claim they were force ghosts of ancient Jedi. Others would say they were dark side illusions, tricks of a dying tyrant's mind. But those who had witnessed them, who had seen Thor call lightning from the storm and Kratos walk through fire, would know the truth. For a brief moment, gods had walked among the stars, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.
The tale of Thor and Kratos' journey through the Star Wars galaxy became legend on both sides of the dimensional divide. In the Star Wars universe, the sudden death of the Sith Emperor fractured the Empire into warring factions, giving the Republic breathing room to rebuild and eventually push back against Sith aggression. Historians would debate for generations whether the mysterious warriors were real or mythological, but those who had fought beside them knew the truth. Bastila Shan kept the full details of the Emperor's dimensional research classified, understanding that such knowledge in the wrong hands could threaten the entire galaxy. But she never forgot the lesson Thor and Kratos taught, that power, no matter how absolute it seemed, could be challenged by those with sufficient will and courage. In Asgard and the Norse realms, Thor's brief disappearance became a turning point. The experience of fighting powerless and alone, of having to rely on cunning and determination rather than overwhelming might, changed him. He became a wiser king, a more measured warrior, understanding that true strength came not from power alone, but from the will to use it righteously. Kratos, too, was changed. He had found in Thor a kindred spirit, another warrior who carried the weight of divine purpose and understood the cost of fighting for something greater than oneself. The ghost of Sparta had proven he could forge alliances, could work beside another to achieve what neither could accomplish alone. It was another step in his long journey from monster to something approaching redemption. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, in the space where realities touched but did not merge, the echoes of their battle remained, a permanent scar in the fabric of existence that whispered of the day two gods crossed galaxies to break a tyrant's throne. Some chains are meant to be broken, some tyrants must fall, and sometimes the universe itself conspires to bring together warriors from impossible distances to ensure that justice, however violent its delivery, is finally served. May the Force be with you. More stories await.